Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. Today we're going to cover collaboration for Civil 3D and BIM 360 design. And so we are happy to have with us Dave Simeone, who is the product line manager and who has really led the charge on this whole collaboration for Civil 3D and BIM 360 design. Also on the line with us is John Sayre. He is my counterpart. We're both technical marketing managers. My name is Ben Wardell. I'm also technical marketing manager. So a few items of note. This web series, again, is designed to bring product developers and the marketers of the product with the users together to let you see what we're working on, some of the new features, kind of what the latest things are. So next month, it sounds like it will be related to Esri and ArcGIS will be the next webcast, but that'll be December. So pay attention to that community forum as well as your email for any sort of invites for that. And so speaking of the webinar portal, the Autodesk webinar portal, this site is available right here. And any sort of upcoming webinars, you can sign up for those here, as well as you can get access. One of the most frequent questions that we tend to get is, can I get the recording for the previous webinar that was submitted? Those are all posted here on this site on demand, and you can also sign up and see what's coming as well. Same is true when it comes to the civil community site, as well as you can get some tips and tricks and some different other information that is available there. As a general disclaimer, anything that's shown here that's reflected as future is not a guarantee that it'll be in the product. I believe everything we're showing today is already in the product, but just anything that's reflected as future, please don't take that as an absolute commitment that we'll make it in and make any purchasing decisions based on that. As always, we want everybody to ask a lot of questions. We've got a handful of people who are standing by to help out with the questions. We'll get to as many questions as we can. We cannot promise that we'll answer all the questions. I think we usually toward the end get more questions than we could possibly handle in that amount of time. But ask a lot of questions, and that's kind of what makes this webinar interactive with you and with us. So with that, we've got a couple of poll questions that we would like to get to. I believe we have a few of those, and so we'll launch those right now. So we just want to see your familiarity with BIM 360 for those of you who are using it and those of you who may not have heard of it, and anything in between. We'll let that run for another 10 or 15 seconds. So. Okay, I'll go ahead and end it right there. So looks like most of you are using it. Some of you have explored it and others have heard of it. So that's good. So let's launch the next question then. And again, we just want to see your familiarity with working with BIM 360. So. And again, we'll let that run for another 15 seconds or so. So if you get a chance, chime in, provide an answer there. Okay, so it does look like the majority are asking, hey, BIM 360 supports Civil 3D. Well, that's what we're going to show today. With that in mind, I'm going to now move on and we're going to turn the floor over to Mr. Dave Simeone. So Dave, you're up.
Great, thanks, Ben. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Cool, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Dave Simeone. I'm product line manager for the infrastructure products. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to be part of the launch of this effort. The key that I think, to kind of set the table a little bit, right? Let's talk a little bit about some of the trends that are influencing our effort around here. First one being It really all comes down to, a need to have data in a more centralized form, right? Historically, we've worked with data either in a, your local, you know, C drive or on a local server or LAN or WAN. And that presents challenges as we broaden the way that we work, right? One of them is this whole need for teams to work in a distributed manner, right? That might be one company with multiple offices. It might be where you have teams that form of different companies that kind of form and then disperse. They may be all over the world. So how do teams work in a distributed way? And then there's just also general BIM adoption and growth, right? When we say BIM, it's not just about the development and delivery of a design model and documentation. It's how that will be built and how it will be managed, how the intelligence of what we're creating, what you're creating as designers is being leveraged beyond just delivery of sheets for acceptance. And then there's the whole focus on standards. So IFC and ISO standards and so on. All of these things come towards this need to have data in a central place. Now, data in a central place is a challenge really with the current tools that exist, right? Starting from the left, I mean, people have been trying to use FTP and SharePoint sites, right? These are not really well suited for this environment, right? I mean, they're not at all built really to to be integrated or connected in with the design tools that you use. I'd venture to guess most of you have been using or actively using network drives, right? Those are expensive to manage, hard for you to share, certainly difficult once you start trying to work with people outside of your firewall. So it's a really difficult way for us to scale up to where we need to go. Then, continuing, towards the right, there are tools that are available for basic cloud storage, right? And really, this is saying I can put all of my files or all of my data up into some central location in the cloud. But again, there's no integration, no connectivity with the design tools that you use. There's no ability to generate or leverage all the derivatives or the incremental things that are really purpose-built around what it is that you're building. And then finally, there are point solutions or purpose-built solutions that exist in the market today, but none of those are really built but to work with our tools that are certainly not tailored to work with the Autodesk portfolio. And they really solve very specific needs. I mentioned, say, many of them are very much about the way that you've worked versus the way that we need to go. So when we look at the solution that we're launching now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with what's been delivered in the past with Revit, but Revit really provides a work sharing solution that's based upon multiple people being able to interact with the Revit model. On the civil side, we work in a different structure. This is really that managed collaboration approach where I've got different people in different locations, and it's very file-based, right? We're using AutoCAD XREFs, we're using Civil 3D data shortcuts to build out the model and then to build out the deliverables, right? So that's the first area of focus that we're trying to resolve or target, right? It's really how do we give you a great solution that allows multiple people to work in multiple locations, within this kind of environment that we frame as managed collaboration. Where the incremental value comes is as we go towards the right. The data that you're creating through this process now is available for a much broader audience of stakeholders. So, if we look to the left, it's about BIM 360 design. This is about how you're going to model, how you're going to leverage your civil model in this environment. And then as we look towards the right docs, this is all of the storage and the incremental value that you can get. So Ben, if you go to the next one, so this is an example of some of the things. John and Ben are going to show you some of these today, but they just won't have enough time to show you it all. But this is where we start really getting into that difference, right? So that to the left, it was all about how do I work better with Civil 3D? How do I work with my team to complete my production work within Civil 3D? This part right here is how do I make that data that I create, all those files that I create, more valuable? Right? How do I manage my documents, so version control and document control? How do I start getting into management of markups and issue tracking? How do I take my model, whether it's 2D or 3D, to a larger audience so that we validate and verify that what we're designing actually is going to resolve design requirements, as well as identify any design issues. And how do I take it into the field? So when I'm in the field, I can make sure that I have all the right context, or that my design, again, there are things that exist in the field that are going to impact what it is that I'm including in my model, right? So these are those incremental values. And we understand first we need to have it so it works great for the Civil 3D production use, but we also are investing heavily and everything I'm showing you right there is available with the current solution, but this is where, as we go forward, the list of things you'll be able to do will just continue to scale and scale and scale. Okay, so before I pass it on to John and Ben, I just want to clarify the delivery, right? What it is that you need for this solution. So obviously you need Civil 3D in this environment, but then when we look at BIM 360, you have at its base, you have all those administration, dashboard, analytics, data repository. All of those come as part of BIM 360 docs, right? So think of this as where all of your data is going to be stored. This is where you're going to set permissions. This is where you're going to invite people into the project. This is where you're going to have the ability to view and interact and add issues and track issues and so on. On the design side, right, this is a unique subscription that's above and beyond docs. This gives you, for those who have been using Revit, this is where that Revit Cloud Work Sharing has existed in the past, right? So we have a similar entitlement or service that's now been introduced, which is Collaboration for Civil 3D. This is what's going to allow you to really tie your Civil 3D project, right? The data shortcut creation, data shortcut referencing. This is what is going to enable you to have that support. So that's your critical piece that you're going to want to leverage out of design, but then also make sure that you're using this entitlement. A little bit lower, you'll see there's that design collaboration module, right? These are things that we're going to expand into to provide civil infrastructure specific capabilities that combine in or leverage that, or that fall under that design collab module. So Ben, if you fill up the rest here, just to kind of complete the story, right? This is not just a matter, as I said at the beginning, it's about expanding, support for the BIM workflow, right? The key to that is the data that we're generating, the models, the files, etc., are all in a location, stored in a way which makes them accessible to others. So this is where we start looking at how does what I create as an engineer become available in my construction solutions, right? So whether it's on the pre-construction or field execution aspects, right? This is where we're trying to work towards having one solution. Again, at its base, it's all the same data. And then over time, we're building out those workflows that make it so that data can be more accessible and shared for a much larger audience. So that's my high-level setup. Again, it's functionality that's going to depend upon you having Civil 3D, BIM 360 design, and John and Ben will walk through all those capabilities, both on the how the system works within, from a Civil 3D perspective, but then how it fits into this broader solution. So with that, I'll stop yammering on and I'll pass it on to John.
Ben, can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate everybody that's attending the call today. First off, what I'd like to do is we're going to start with the basics, okay? I'm going to walk you through in a video. We are going to do some live demo today, but I wanted to walk through in a video just simply how to create a BIM 360 project, okay? Because I know that a lot of the folks on the line have maybe never done that before. So I wanted to be sure. Hold on just a second, Ben. You may be unmuted there. So I wanted to be sure that everybody understood the basics of how to get started with BIM 360 design and how to create that project. So this video walks you through how to do that. So I'm just going to talk to the video and then we're going to jump into the live demo portion of the presentation. So literally we start by opening up BIM 360 in a web browser. Okay, we log in, and after we've logged in, we're going to go to the account page or the account admin page. That's where we're going to be able to see the project directories and where we're going to be able to add new projects. We'll be able to see all of our projects here in this view, but this is where we're going to add our new project. So I'm going to go ahead and let it fill that out. So we'll add it. There are a few things in the project profile that we do have to fill out. The project name, if you see that here, project type. If I let this scroll a little bit more, my lettering's over this, but the project start date and end date and this BIM 360 field project language, you will need to fill those out. The rest of this, if you don't want to fill it out, you don't have to, but all of this is here so that you can kind of personalize this project and put as much information into the profile so that if people want to just see what's going on with the project, what type of project it is, things of that nature, they can see that. So we filled this out pretty thoroughly. There's different types of construction type you can choose from. Obviously, project values. All projects are going to be different values. You can add a custom image to your project so that you can see. You can quickly just look at the image in the home screen, and you'll be able to see what the project actually looks like. Now, once you've gone through and selected the image if you wanted to and filled that information out, the next step is to activate your services. So the services that we will activate today are document management, project management, and design collaboration. Now, in the document management area, you have the option at the very beginning here, before we even add or assign a project administrator, we can actually copy our project settings from a previous project, or if you've generated a project template and just stuck it out there so that you can copy those settings across, you can do that. What that will do is bring your folder structure across, so you can mimic your exact folder structure that you have on your LAN environment. Now, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can go in and you can manually add the folders, and I'm going to show that in just a second. So we just assign a project administrator. Now, it will take just a little bit to activate document management, and one little thing I want to remind everybody of is that you can't activate project management or design collaboration until document management is activated. So once that's done, you've set administrators to all of those, then you can jump in and start to add project members. All right, so as you can see here, I'm going to add my teammate Ben Wardell, and when Ben gets added, I'm going to add him to the project, and then I can look and see what kind of permissions that he has at the project level. I could go in and completely fill out as many project members as I want at this time. I say at this time because we can add project members at any point during the project. Now, once we've added our project members, then we can go in and add and build our folder structure. Now, again, we could have brought all of this across by just selecting a project that was previously built, and it would have generated all of this folder structure for us in the beginning. So we wouldn't have had to manually do this, but you can manually go in and add these folders at any time. It works much like it does in Windows Explorer. Now, once you have the folders generated, you can start to add folder level permissions. All right, so what that means is I selected that CAD folder, and I'm going to give Ben permissions to do specific things or be able to have specific rights to that folder. And if you look here in the permission level area, you can see upload only, view, download, and upload. You also have this folder control. One thing I want to kind of point out first is it explains it right here underneath. If you give a person folder level control, they have full administrative controls, okay? There may be a particular instance where you may want them to have that type of control over that folder, but just be wary of this, because they will have, whenever the files are locked inside of that folder, they will be able to go back in a BIM 360 view and actually unlock files, okay? So that could kind of muddy the waters a little bit, but if everything is explained, it should work fine. It's completely up to you whether you give folks this type of control or not. If you are a project administrator, like I set Ben and myself up earlier, then you would be able to do that anyway. But I just kind of want to bring that to everybody's attention. So I'm going to go ahead and give him folder control here. One other thing to add is that it would just be that type of permission on this folder. It wouldn't be every folder in the project itself. So we just go ahead and fill out everybody that we want to have access and permissions to these particular folders. And we can actually go in and change the permission level on the fly. So this can be done at any time throughout the project. Okay, so it doesn't matter that you, let me pause that. It doesn't matter that you gave them folder control in the beginning. You could change that control midway through the project if you'd like. Okay, so that in a nutshell is how we create a project in BIM 360. Now I know it's not really a deep dive into that, but we wanted to show that it is very simple to get started. From there, I'm going to hand it over to Ben, and we're going to walk through the Civil 3D home screen.
All right, thanks, John. So hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes, sir.
We're going to do a little bit of tennis in this presentation. We're going to do some back and forth. So, and want everyone to keep in mind, John is in Missouri. I am in Colorado in the United States, and so we're not in the same office or even in the same building. We're states apart, and so while we're doing this demonstration, we'll be able to show how the collaboration works. But in the beginning portion of this, when we launch Civil 3D, we'll have a couple different options here. We can have the regular tab where we would show our CAD view, but we also have this start menu right here. And so I've selected the start menu. A couple options that are available right here. When I go to recent, this is going to show me all my recent history. And if I hover over this, this will show me exactly the location of where these files are found, as well as it will determine and distinguish between files that are cloud-based or files that are stored on my local drive. Now, if I choose to, I can actually select this little tab that says BIM 360. And what this will do is this will take me to my most recent file or project that I've been in recently. In this project, I was in a previous project, and I can just select and go to the particular project we want to go for our demo. And all we have to do is select that drop-down menu, and any projects that we have rights or access to will display when we choose that. So now I'm just going to navigate through these windows and go to the location of where we have these particular files that are stored. Now, one thing you will notice here is when I get to the file level, I can see a couple of these files that are available. There are a handful of little icons that are present when these files are displayed. And if I hover over this, I can see this lock icon, and I can see that John is actually in this file called Surface. And there's another slightly different icon there with a pencil near that, and that one's been locked by me. So it's got a pencil with a lock near it, meaning that I have access to it. I have read-write access to it, but I also have it locked so that I'm the only one in that file at this particular time. So a couple different tools that are useful, that are good for controlling file control when we're on a project level. Under learning, there's a handful of tips, tricks, different useful bits of information, so that if there are any questions or issues that you've got, a lot of this can really serve as a good resource, especially for those who are getting up to speed when it comes to Civil 3D, as well as these getting started videos. And that's exactly what they are. Any sort of these topics or any of this information that is relevant or useful, you click on this and you'll see a short demo video that will take you and walk you through some of these different topics that are available there. Now, the same is true with any of these, some of these options down here, this community forum, what's new. If you do stumble into some of these issues and do have some questions, these are some of the best places to go. It's like the customer support and the community forum. A lot of those questions, and especially even some questions that we're not able to get to today, if they're really pressing, I encourage you guys to go to this area of Civil 3D as far as these community forums to ask those questions. So that's kind of a brief overview just on the home screen. With that, I'm now going to turn it back over to John to start doing the demonstration of the data shortcuts. So John, it's yours.
All right, Ben. I'm assuming you can see my screen again. All right. Yes. So Ben talked about, and again, this is the home screen or the start menu on my machine here in Missouri. And you can see again that we have this file, this Surface file is open and locked by myself. And Ben has this file, the working file, he has it locked on his machine. Now, you can also see this in the web view, okay? So this is just in Google Chrome. and I have BIM 360 docs, BIM 360 design open in Google, and you can see that I only see one file lock right now. Okay, well, I had this up before Ben actually had locked that file. All right, so I can just hit a refresh. And if I refresh this real quick, you'll be able to see in the web view also who has files locked. So I can now see it's updated, and I can see that I have, that Ben has the working file locked himself. Okay, so I wanted to kind of show you that also. So let's jump right in and talk about how we could create data shortcuts. So I'm going to play the part of a surveyor right now. Okay, so let's think about that workflow wise. So I have a surface that I need to share with everyone. So the way that I would do that on a WAN LAN would be to, or one way to do it would be to create a data shortcut. Now that's going to be, again, Ben, I think you're not muted. The way that that would happen on a WAN LAN environment would be that you would probably just have a data shortcut project that's out there on the server. So you would set your working folder to that location. Well, because we're using BIM 360 Design, we're going to set this to BIM 360 and house all of our data shortcuts for this project that we just created inside of the BIM 360 environment, which is in the cloud. Okay, so I have my surface. I'm just going to right click on data shortcuts here in my prospector, and I'm going to set my working folder. Okay, your working folder can be anything underneath your project that it needs to be, okay? But it is restricted to that or you need to think about it being restricted to that project. So I have a folder underneath here. If I get into CAD, I have one called data shortcuts. So I'll just hit select, and it will path out to that particular folder, all right? So it does take it just a second. Once I have that built, then I can once I have that set, I can right click on it and hit new data shortcut project folder. All right, so we're gonna call this project data shortcuts. All right, and I will simply hit OK. Now what it's gonna do is it's going to create that, the same type of folder structure that you're used to seeing on your local machine or your LAN environment. It's going to create that there, all right, in BIM 360. And I can actually hover over this, and I can see that it is mapped out correctly to my project on BIM 360. Okay, so the next thing to do is to create data shortcuts. Now we may get a dialog box here that comes up. We'll go ahead and hit create data shortcuts. This is pretty standard. I could have this drawing may not necessarily be associated to the current drawing. You're going to get this dialog whether you're in a local environment or in the cloud. So you just simply hit close, and we right click and we associate the project to the current drawing, and just hit OK. Now once it's associated, we can create data shortcuts. Now, if we have, I only have the existing ground and maybe a pipe network that's in here in this drawing. I'm just going to push out the existing ground surface. All right. So I'll go ahead and hit OK, and it will populate that DREF underneath surfaces here. Now, before I hand it back over to Ben, I want to kind of give you this scenario that what is this doing for us? Well, it's giving us it's giving every stakeholder that needs this particular piece of information, you can give them access to this because it's in the cloud. Okay, so if they need, if I'm the surveyor and I'm not under the same roof as everybody else that's collaborating on the project, then what happens with the surface? Well, I either get it in an email and I have to add it to the project, you know, or some other way, or I go out to OneDrive, or I go out to a cloud drive that I download, and then I bring it into the project under the roof. Well, lo and behold, what happens if it changes? Okay, what happens if the surface changes? Well, it sure would be nice if the surveyor, maybe in another state, actually has control over this particular data reference. Because if he or she adds to this and it updates, then guess what? Everything under our project that this is associated to will actually update. Okay, so that's the key benefit. It doesn't, you're in a cloud environment, so everybody that needs access to this will have access to it. And the one person that needs to update it can update it, and then it broadcasts across the entire project. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it back over to Ben and let him show you how it comes into his working drawing.
Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing that John just set up. So he had set the project. I'm going to set the project data folder. So give this just a second here. In fact, I'm going to back out here for just a second. I'm going to start by setting my working folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to browse out to BIM 360, and I'm going to Apple Springs demo, project files, CAD, and John, it was data shortcuts, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to select that folder right there. Okay, and then once I've got that, now I'm going to go in and I'm going to set the project folder here. So we'll give this just a second, and we'll see that it's transferring files. And what we'll see when this pops up is that we see that project folder that John just created, the project data shortcuts. So I'm going to select OK. And got on my other screen, I've got a couple of files that shows that it's transferring. And once that has updated, now I can expand the surfaces and I can see that existing ground surface that John just created. And so if I right click on that and I say create reference for that, I can set all my set all the standards for that ground file. When I select OK, now I can zoom to the extent of that file, and I've got access to that file that John just created. Okay. Now John is still in this file, and John, why don't we go ahead and have you? Let's let me turn it back over to you so they can watch you make the change. So I'm going to give it back to John.
All right. So again, the surveyor needs to make a change, or whoever generated this surface needs to make a change to the drawing. And obviously, Ben just referenced that drawing in, so he's going to need to have his surface update. He doesn't want to have to worry about that. So I'm just going to do something simple here in my surface. I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a point. All right, let's make a mountain right there. So we're going to say that is 10 or 1050, and we now have a mountain in the middle of our screen. All right. So once I've done that, that's a simple edit. They can make as many edits as they want. They could add additional data over here if they had to go out on a second day and add data. Then once that's done, you just simply hit save. Okay. And once I save, what it's going to do is it's going to push out the update to BIM 360, and it will also update the data reference. Now, you do need to be a little bit patient, because in the background here, I've got my desktop connector up, and it already has flashed across and said that the drawing was updated or saved to BIM 360. So it comes up and tells you what's working in the background. It's kind of nice to have this because you can see what's going on with the desktop connector and keep looking at it, just to be sure that you don't maybe overrun it. But we've saved this now, so Ben, you should be able to check for references here and see if you can see the update.
All right, and so we're back on my screen here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Collaborate tab under Civil 3D, and you'll notice that these green circle buttons here, it says check reference status. All I'm going to do is I'm going to select that button. It's going to give it just a second to think, and sometimes you'll see either on one screen or on the other, you'll see that transferring file. But what's going to happen is I'm going to have this window come up, and it will show me that it's looking at both X references and data shortcuts, or DREFs. And what it's told me is that this Apple Springs subdivision surface has been updated. So all I have to do in this case is I just hit select OK, and I'll have this little pop-up window come down here in the lower right corner in this cloud. All I have to do is I hit synchronize, and I give it just a second to process. And now we can see my surface has been updated with that point that John just added to that. So I can have updates to this information just by selecting this check reference status here. So once we have this information set up and into our drawing, Now we can kind of take the next step. So John has shown us kind of how to set up these data shortcuts. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up the my XREF dialog window. So give that a minute just to load. And I'm going to start bringing in some of these files that have been posted to this site. So right now I'm going to just do the same process that you would do ordinarily with a LAN connection. And I'm actually going to go inside this XReference folder, and I'm going to select this base file. So this is the base file that this surface is associated with, and I'm just going to select OK. Again, you'll see this transferring button, and like John showed before, if I wanted to, I could also bring up the desktop connector to just kind of see what's happening at the time. And you can see right now in the background, what it's doing is it's transferring this file. So it's bringing this file in so that I can see it. Now, once it's loaded, you can see that clear out. Now I can specify it just as I would in a normal workflow. I can set that up as an attachment or as an overlay. In this case, I'll just set it up as an attachment. And so that comes in exactly where it should, as we would expect. And I can do the same thing with a couple other files. I'll do that with some of these other files as well. And there's a couple different things we want to point out. So let's say we wanted to go to this roadway file. And this roadway file's got a number of our alignments, corridors, and profiles that are associated with this particular model as well. And it'll do the same thing. We can run through this with file after file, and it'll transfer the files. It'll give it just a second to run there. And once this is ready to go, same story as well. And I'll bring up the desktop connector. And sometimes it's good to just kind of watch this, keep your eye on it to see what is running and what's happening in the background. So, all right. And once that's ready, we'll do the same thing. We'll just specify that we want to set this as an attachment. We're going to set that right there and just say OK. Okay. Now, once everything is loaded there, the next question or the next step that we want to take is we would want to look at and see, well, what happens if one of these files has changed? So we can actually take a look at the start menu. John, do you want me to turn it over to you, or do you want me to just show on my end what's going on?
No, you need to check and see if I've maybe modified that base file.
You bet. Okay. So we've got this base file, and we've got an indication that John may have done some kind of an update. We'll do the same thing. We'll run the check reference status here. We'll give it just a second to think and to process. And again, we have these little transfer windows. And again, and as you saw before, when we had the data shortcuts reference come up, when there was a change there, this time it specifies which XREF has changed. And you'll want to pay particular attention to this, just because when we see that a reference has changed, this is part of the workflow, and I'll demonstrate exactly what to do. So we see that this base file has changed. So we just select OK. But we see nothing's happened. We just selected OK, nothing's popped up or anything like that. Well, we have one more step to do. So what we need to do is just right-click on this file and just hit reload. And then we'll see that this will pop up, showing some of the unreconciled layers. Anyway, what we've got right here is that we can see the change that John has made. And he's added a rectangle around this file. So anytime we're looking for files that may have updated or that we need to have updated, all we have to do is check those reference statuses. And if something has changed, we will go one more step, and we'll select, we'll right click on this to reload it. Now, one thing I do want to point out just very briefly right now, and I'll bring up the BIM 360 web browser as well. If I were to, let's say I'm in this file, I want to close it down, but I want to move where the roadway file is. Right now, if you look at the very bottom of this little white window that's popped up, you can see the save path. It's in the same directory as my working file, so it just shows the name of the file. But if we needed to do some reorganization, or occasionally a reference file might move. In this case, if in BIM 360, if we were to move roadway into the XREF folder, now what would happen normally in a LAN connection is the next time we get into this file, it's going to say, hey, I can't find this reference file. It's broken. You need to reattach it. It's gone. It'll just show up in red. But in this case, BIM 360 will actually keep track of where that reference file has moved to, as long as it's moved within this project. BIM 360 can find and locate where that file is. So this is something that's another added advantage, a very high value prop that will help us not only keep track of all the files, but we can also, if something does change, and things change all the time on projects, if something needs to be reorganized, that's information that we can still have access to, and it'll maintain that live link. So with that, John, I'm going to now turn it over to you to let them to demonstrate the inner workings of BIM 360 in the web browser.
All right. So what I'm going to cover now is a little bit about version control, and then we're going to jump in and use some functionality called File Compare, which is actually fantastic because we can take two files and compare them. And I'm going to walk you through that. So we'll just stay with that right now. So version control. So every time that you perform a save, it does create a version here inside of BIM 360. Okay, so there are a lot of versions there are a lot of drawings that might have just one or two versions. There might be some that you work on. You may save it 15 times, so there may be additional 15 versions per day. But there's going to be times where something may happen. Maybe I've got a good example because this has happened to me. I'm working along and all of a sudden the power goes off, okay? Well, if the power goes off, things can go awry. So if I need to come back to a previous version that was saved, maybe I lost a bunch, or maybe I didn't want to. Maybe the drawing got corrupt somehow or something. I can go back to a previous version of that file. So if I take a look here, and I'll just use my Surface file for instance, I'm just going to hit my version button here, and it gives me my version history. It tells me which version of my drawing is current. And I can see that I have, obviously, all of these other versions here to pick from. Now, if I want to change that, or I want to actually look and see and compare two different files or two different versions of this file, I can select Compare Versions here at the bottom. Now, it selects these two versions of the file, and my screen is a little bit bigger, so I'm not going to be able to see all of the versions. But say I wanted to compare these two particular versions of this file, I can just simply hit compare, and it will give me a preview of those two versions, okay? Now, it will load this. You can actually change versions here. So if I want to go to a different version all the way down to version 1, I can. But the fact of the matter is that you can see which version you visually want to go back to, and then just select cancel and go right back to that. And say I wanted to go back to version 11, then I simply select make current, and this dialog comes up and it says, are you sure you wish to restore a copy of version 11 to the current version? If I hit restore, and I'm not going to do it today because we've got these files open, but if I hit restore, then version 11 will now be at the top and it will say current here to the right. Now, anybody that opens even with an XREF of this file, that the version that we have set current, that is what they will then see. So again, it's a great way for disaster management maybe, because when I say disaster, the power going off whenever you're working on something, if you have no backup power, then your machine goes off and there's no telling what happens to that drawing. So being able to come back to a prior version is huge. It's there's a lot of versions to select from, so you may be just wanting to go back to a prior version, back here at version 8 or version 2 or whatever you'd like to go back to. So great way to be able to get your drawing recovered, or just simply say, this is a specific design of a road. All right, Ben and I have a demonstration where we show a highway that's got a braided ramp, and then one that doesn't, or a version of that drawing that has a braided ramp and a version that does not. All right, so we can actually go back to different design criteria for, or different designs. Let's just say that we can go back to different designs just by changing the version of this file also. Now, the other thing I want to walk through is file compare. Okay, so we kind of touched on file compare just a second ago, but I want to compare two files that are not the same versions. I'm not going to compare versions of a file. I'm going to compare two different files themselves. So I simply go back to my version here that I want to try and compare, and I select compare versions, and you can just let it select the top two. It's going to default do that, and hit compare. Now this is showing the two different versions of this same file, right? So this is the file that I saved for the base. It had the rectangle. This is the file that bends or that did not have the base or did not have the rectangle, all right? So that's the previous version that was saved. So I'm simply going to do this. I'm going to change to this V6, okay? And it says you're looking at, you got to choose two different documents to compare versions. So I want to change complete drawings. So I'm going to go up and select change, and I'm going to navigate out here in BIM 360, and I'll scroll down here to Civil and XREF, and I'll select this base alt file, all right? And now this has got an alternate design, all right? So if I want to see what that looks like, either in an overlay or a side-by-side type view, I'll just hit compare. Now, once you're here in the compare view of BIM 360, I can simply do this. I can do an overlay here, or I can do a side-by-side view. All right? And I can use this slide bar and I can move this back and forth, and I can quickly see what's changed. If you see, we've added a new road. Instead of building the cul-de-sac here and here, we've added a new road that comes completely through and connects the subdivision. Now I can slide this all the way across and see if anything else has changed. You know, notice that I've got a detention pond here, and that's just additional information that's in that particular file. But we can, excuse me, what is key is that we can see the difference in these two particular files. Now, if you know, let's take a little bit of a step back. Maybe we could do the same thing. We could compare the two files even with versions. Okay, we can do that. I don't want you to think you can't, but I did want to definitely show the fact that we can, you know, select two different files and then specific versions out of those two files. So this is to me, this is huge for just collaborating with folks. They can bring this up in a web browser, and they can start to look at things and see what has changed and what has not. It's also probably a pretty good way to keep track yourself of things that have changed. Even if you're looking at it in an iPad or something else, you can use this type of functionality. So with that, I'd like to actually jump in and show you a little bit more about the web view in BIM 360. So I'm going to go back a folder here, and I'm going to open up this design file, all right? And I'm going to select this 3D view, and I want to bring to your attention all of the rich data that comes across. Now, there's not much in this particular 3D view, but well, number one, you can see what all's 3D and what's not. That's a great way to do that. I can actually select the surface. If I want to turn it off, just right-click on it and hit hide selected, and I can kind of narrow down what I'm looking at. But I've got a couple manholes in here that have been brought in from Civil 3D. All right, so if I want to interrogate anything inside of this 3D view, I can just by selecting it, and then I can select properties. Now this brings up a dialog or a cue card that has all of the information on this manhole. Okay, so this is everything that was pushed out from Civil 3D, or actually is in the Civil 3D model that defines this particular manhole. I could simply select the other manhole here, and it gives me the information on that. So why does this help you? And I'll kind of expand this out just a little bit so I can I'll close that so it moves over. So you can see the connected pipe diameter. Okay, all of the rich data. Now, it's not restricted to just this. So if we add property set data to anything inside of our Civil 3D model, you would also be able to see any of that property set data here in this particular dialog. Okay, so it's a great way to be able to toggle around inside of the 3D view. You know, I could turn this up just a little bit to where I could see under the ground, and I could select the pipe itself. Okay, so I can see the slope on the pipe, the start end inverts, the 3D pipe length, anything that is on there data-wise in Civil 3D. I'm looking at it here in BIM 360, okay, in the Autodesk Viewer. Okay, so wanted to be sure that we pointed that out. It's again a great way for project managers that may not necessarily have Civil 3D. They can get into this view and they can start to interrogate things inside of that 3D model to make sure that things are designed correctly. Now, what happens if something's not, they run into something that might not necessarily be designed correctly? Okay, maybe they take a look at these inverts on this manhole, all right, and they scroll down, they look at the sump. Let's see if I can find the inverts here. Here we are. They look at these inverts and something doesn't look right, okay? They can go up and create what's called an issue. So if I select create an issue and I move over here, or I have to hit create issue, and I move over here and I put that issue right here. I'm gonna call this issue manhole, let's just say A1, okay? I'm going to assign that issue to Ben because Ben needs to go out and take action on this. I'm going to choose a date that it needs to be put into action. All right, I can set location, I can do location details, but I'm just going to scroll down and say that there is a problem with constructability, and it could actually be something different. We can actually scroll down here. Give me just a second. Nope, it's not the one I wanted. I'm just going to set it to constructability right now. And maybe we need the surveyors to go back out and verify the inverts. So survey needs to, and I misspelled survey, and I am going to take the time to change it, needs to revisit site and update inverts. All right. So once that's done, I hit create. It creates that issue here in BIM 360, and a notification will go out to Ben. Ben will get an email that says there's been a new issue created. He can go directly to this and he can see what needs to happen, and he can take action on that particular issue. It's that fast. So this is not just, as Ben and I are working back and forth, maybe Ben was a designer, I was a surveyor. It's not necessarily even at that level. It's the project managers that are looking at these things and going through and doing QA/QC on specific design. Maybe it's the civil engineer that's directing the designer that has found this issue, and this is going back to their designer that's been working on it. It's a great way for them to review. It's a great way for them to create issues and to communicate what needs to happen to all stakeholders. So with that, I think that's the end of our presentation here, Ben. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Well, you can leave that. Go ahead and leave it up, John, but we've got some questions. Okay. And there's been a lot of questions that have been answered. Thank you to everybody who has posted questions, and really do want to thank everybody who was trying to help in the background to get some of those questions answered. And so a couple of the things that were touched on, a few of the questions, and maybe but before we dive into that, let me pause there. We do have one more question that we're probably going to leave up for just a little bit here. So,
hey, Ben, my screen's showing, I think so.
No, that's it. The poll question's up right now, so that's fine.
Okay. Sorry.
So hold tight with that. But anyway, just want to see if there is any interest in finding out more about BIM 360 for Civil 3D. So any kind of input that you can provide at this point is much appreciated. And so we'll leave that up for just a little bit, but we'll leave that question up while we dive into some of these questions. And so John and I will just kind of talk through some of these. Dave, we may ping you on some of these because it looks like some of these are a little bit outside of our maybe not above our pay grade kind of a thing. So, but one of the questions was, is there a limit to the number of versions that a file can have? We haven't seen a limit to that yet, have we, John?
No, we have not.
So it's gonna, if you have 110 versions, if you have 1,010 versions, I think it will keep track of, however long the life of that file is. It will track those histories. Obviously, the more you have, the more you're gonna have to go through in order to find things. But the purpose of that is just as John described, to give you an alternative backup source, so that if you get into a file and find, you open up a main file and find that all the profiles have been deleted out of it, rather than panicking and trying to call IT to get them to back up yesterday's data, you've got access to it. You don't have to get someone else involved. You can see at what point that data may have gone missing or anything like that. So, and one of the questions they had, John, was as far as being alerted to when files have changed. And Dave, you may want to step in on this one as well. Some of the questions were, hey, is there any kind of alert or anything like that to tell you that when an XREF or a DREF has changed? At this point, as far as to my understanding, there is not. That's why you have the check reference status. Dave, is that something that will be available in the future, or do you know what the plan is on that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's answered it. There's a couple aspects to it. The first thing is there's two situations, right? One is you're in the drawing, and you have to hit that check references. It's a bit of a passive thing that process that confirms desktop up to BIM 360. Do I have the latest version of these files? That is in that situation right now. It's for specific reasons, and it's something that we know we want to improve. The other way that you're going to deal with this is if you open the file. In other words, I'm not in the drawing, I open that file. That is going to actually go through the reference check, right? So in other words, if I start with zero state, open a drawing that has references that may have changed, it's going to go through the process of getting the correct, caching those correct versions or newest versions and update everything. So it's more the I'm in the drawing state that we're working through, but absolutely it is on our radar as something to work on.
Very good. Okay.
While I'm here, Ben, there was another question I'll try to answer verbally. One related to use of Assemble in this environment, and we're working with the Assemble team. There's a few different things as part of that. One of those relates to how Assemble displays or doesn't display civil objects. That's one of the actions, and then just there's a broader initiative underway with all of the construction products. So PlaneGrid, Assemble, etc. Building Connected as to the viewing strategy and so on. So that's a much bigger picture that I can't go into any more detail on that now.
Understood. Okay. Some of the questions we had as well were regarding versioning as well. Some of the questions are, what version of Civil 3D does BIM 360 Design support? And they're asking 2017, 2018. Unfortunately, it is 2020.2. That's the version that it does support. So as part of the changes that have been made, and not to make any kind of a file format change, we're keeping it consistent with that. So right now, BIM 360 Design is compatible with Civil 3D 2020.2. Another question that we had, really great questions, guys. Thank you again to all those who have submitted questions, and we'll go until we don't have any more time. We got a couple more minutes, and so one of the questions was, how secure is the cloud? And that's something that we know is vitally important, and that's a question that is very common, that comes up quite frequently. Dave, is that something you can touch on or discuss briefly? Cloud security.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute, and I was starting to answer another question. Best way there, what we should do, Ben, because this is probably there's a whole bunch of aspects of that. But I think we should point people to the security. There's a whole web page that gets into all of how we manage or how we ensure cloud security. So I'm not sure the best way for us to get that link out.
Understood. Yeah,
just Google.
We know it's been a major concern, and it is an issue that when it comes to sensitive data, confidential data, proprietary data, that has got to be secured. But that is something that is being taken very seriously. And so yeah, there's like Dave said, a lot of information and places you can go to refer to that. So I encourage you to check on that. But we can say yes, security is a top priority when it comes to BIM 360 and storage of this documentation. I had a couple other questions regarding Vault and some of the other versions. BIM 360 Design is really intended to provide better collaboration or more collaboration, just as John has described, as he's showing right here, when it comes to issues or markups or viewing of content. There are some features that are available that we've sort of briefly highlighted today that really do factor into what kind of what benefits that Civil 3D design really offers. And a lot of those, when it comes to not only the collaboration and being able to, with these submittals and these markups and these reviews, it offers kind of a next level of, the ability to provide that information. But this really is intended to be something that people can work on in, if somebody's in Missouri and somebody else is in Colorado, they can get to it, without some of the costly setup or some of the IT infrastructure that's required for a lot of this. So with that cloud connection, that provides that access. So locking is a big thing that's been worked on as well, and some previous versions and renditions of this. Locking, it's come a long way, and it's works very well. It's an automatic file locking, so when two people try and get to into the same file at the same time, it's whoever got there first has got access to it. The other person's going to see a read-write access on that, so it's not a manual process. So, Dave or John, I don't know if you have any final remarks, but we have reached the top of the hour, and I want to thank everybody for your participation, for the questions that were submitted. And again, thank you to everybody kind of behind the scenes helping out with those questions and helping to answer some of those. Dave, John, I don't know if you have anything final you'd like to add.
I'm good.
I would thank both of you
that came today. So
yeah, and thank you guys for pulling the presentation together, and Tim and Heiko for answering what seemed like hundreds of questions. So
right, that's right.
Obviously, yeah, and obviously all the attendees. We thank you for joining us.
Great, thanks, guys. And again, look for those in those sites. Look for those on the AU. The AEC portals page or the civil community site. This webcast will be broadcast and submitted there. So thank you, everyone. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day. And with that, we'll sign off. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.